You are tired. It is not the tiredness of a difficult week. It is that tiredness that sleeps with you, that wakes up before you, that is there even before you open the first application of the day. It is the tiredness of someone who never stops trying. And the cruelest part is not the tiredness itself. The cruelest part is that you believe you need it, that if you stop, everything will collapse, that your miracle only arrives after your blood. What you feel now is not faith. It is a contract, an invisible contract, not signed with a pen, but engraved deep in your chest through years of misunderstood religion, performance culture, and a world that taught you that reward is proportional to sacrifice. And today I need to tell you something that will change the way you view every task, every project, and every prayer in your life. This contract is being torn up in the spiritual world. Now, while you watch this video, but the tearing will hurt, because the voice of the contract will not fall silent in the first week. It will whisper in your ear when you sit in peace for 5 minutes. Shouldn't you be working? It will appear when you go to sleep early. Did you do enough today? It will wake you up at 3 in the morning with a list of pending items. And if you do not know what this voice is, where it comes from and how it functions in your brain, you will continue to obey it as if it were God, when, in truth, it is the opposite of God. Stay with me until the end of this video, because I am going to show you the science behind the brain state that blocks your greatest blessings, the biblical and Hebrew root of rest that most preachers never taught you, and a practical protocol that takes less than a morning to begin undoing decades of effort in the wrong place. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, do it now, because this type of content does not appear in your feed by accident. It arrives for those who are ready. Let's start with science. Not because science is greater than faith, but because God created your brain, and understanding how it works is understanding the language the Spirit uses to reach you. Your brain operates at different frequencies throughout the day. When you are accelerated, responding to messages, solving problems, planning, worrying, racing against time, your brain is in the beta wave. The beta frequency is between 13 and 30 Hertz, and it is necessary for executive function. You need it to drive, to work, to make quick decisions. But there is a silent trap here. When you live permanently in the beta wave, when there is no rest, when survival mode becomes the default mode, your nervous system enters chronic collapse. Researchers at UniFSP documented that chronic stress alters the structure of the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible exactly for wisdom, high-level decision-making, and creativity. In other words, the more you force it, the more you lose access to the part of your brain that would generate the solutions you are desperately trying to produce. But there is another frequency. Between 4 and 8 Hertz, it is called the theta wave, and it is at this frequency that things happen which logic cannot explain. The HeartMath Institute in the United States conducted decades of research documenting that in the theta state, the heart and brain enter into coherence, a synchronization that activates what they call heart intelligence, a state of reception where intuition, creativity, and spiritual connection function at maximum capacity. It is the frequency of lucid dreaming. It is the frequency of those who wake up with the answer they did not have the night before. It is the frequency that separates those who chase results from those who attract results. And here comes the revelation I need you to keep. You did not lose this frequency because you are weak. You lost it because the system around you was interested in keeping you in beta. A brain in beta buys more, obeys more, questions less, produces more for others, and rests less for itself. A researcher from USP, a doctor in behavioral neurosciences, published an analysis demonstrating that urban Brazilian adults over 35 spend an average of 14 hours a day in an active beta state, and less than 40 minutes in low-frequency brain states capable of deep regeneration. 40 minutes in an entire day. You are not tired due to a lack of faith. You are tired because no one gave you permission to stop. Like this video now if this is already making sense to you, because what comes next is the part that will connect all of this with a biblical truth that has been hidden in translation for centuries. I want to take you to a specific moment in the life of Elijah. Not the Elijah who called fire from heaven on Mount Carmel, not the Elijah who faced the 450 prophets of Baal and won. I want to take you to the Elijah who is lying under a tree in the desert, exhausted, asking to die. It is in 1 Kings chapter 19. Elijah has just had the greatest victory of his prophetic career, and immediately after, a woman named Jezebel threatened to kill him, and he fled. He fled for 40 days, and he fell under a broom tree in the desert and said, "It is enough, Lord, take my life." What did God do? He did not preach. He did not correct. He did not say, "Get up and go to work, you still have much to fulfill." God sent an angel, and the angel touched Elijah and said, "Get up and eat." And there was a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. Elijah ate and went back to sleep. The angel came again, touched him, and said, "Get up and eat, for the journey is too long for thee." Elijah ate, drank, and in the strength of that food walked 40 days and 40 nights. Do you perceive what happens here? The divine response to Elijah's exhaustion was not more work. It was food, it was water, it was sleep. God did not arrive with an agenda. God arrived with bread. Now tell me, what happened to your capacity to receive bread? When was the last time you simply ate without guilt, rested without justification, existed without producing? There is a word in Hebrew that captures exactly what God did for Elijah at that moment. The word is nuach, N-V-H-A, which means to settle, to rest, to establish oneself. It is the same root as the word Noah. The father of the flood received this name because his parents said he would bring nuach, rest, relief, settling. Nuach is not inactivity. It is the settling after the flight. It is the establishment after the movement. It is the state of one who has arrived, not one who has given up. And it is exactly what the Spirit of God did over the waters before creation. It hovered, it settled, nuach, before anything was created. God creates from the settling, not from the effort. Now comes information that needs to stop you for a moment. In 1968, NASA hired researcher George Land to develop a test to identify the level of creative thinking and genius in children, to select engineers and scientists of the future. Land tested 1,600 children between 3 and 5 years of age. The result was astonishing. 98% of the children reached the maximum score on the Genius test. 10 years later, the same test was applied to the same children, now between 13 and 15 years old. The score at the Genius level dropped to 12%. When they tested adults over 25, only 2%. What happened? Land concluded that the educational system trains children to leave the theta state, the state of genius and reception, and enter permanently into critical beta, judging beta, the beta that evaluates, compares, and fears error. You were born connected. You were born functioning at the frequency where the physical and the spiritual meet. And the system turned that off in you progressively, year after year, failure after failure, humiliation after humiliation, demand after demand. But listen, if it was turned off, it can be turned back on. Write the word "I receive" in the comments now. One word, "I receive." Because what you are about to understand is not theory, it is an activation. And declaring that you receive before fully understanding is exactly the spiritual posture that separates those who transform from those who hear and forget. And I need to talk to you about the voice, because it will appear when you try to rest. It will appear when you try to apply what I am sharing here. And if you do not recognize it by name, it will win again. The voice says, "If I stop, I will lose everything." The voice says, "People will think I am lazy." The voice says, "I haven't done enough yet to deserve rest." This voice has a very specific characteristic. It is never satisfied. You can work 16 hours and it will say you could have worked 17. You can achieve what you always wanted, and it will immediately point to the next insufficiency. There is no arrival in the logic of this voice, because it was not created to take you somewhere. It was created to keep you in motion. Researchers from the Federal Council of Psychology of Brazil identified in population studies that compulsive hyperactivity, the state of being unable to stop doing, is directly linked to early experiences of abandonment, criticism, and affective insecurity. When a child learns that love is conditional on performance, the brain creates a survival circuit that equates rest with danger. To stop is dangerous. To stop is to be abandoned. To stop is to lose approval. And this circuit does not disappear in adult life. It disguises itself as productivity. It disguises itself as responsibility. It even disguises itself as religious devotion. Have you heard that phrase? God blesses those who work. It is not a lie. But it was distorted. It became the spiritual justification for a psychological trauma. And when trauma uses the language of faith, it becomes shielded. Because now questioning compulsive effort seems like questioning faith itself. But the Bible is more honest than that. And it gave me a scene I want to show you now. Martha and Mary, Luke chapter 10. Jesus arrived at the house of the two. Martha stayed serving, preparing, running, doing. Mary sat at the feet of Jesus and stayed listening. And Martha came to Jesus with that phrase I need you to hear for the first time with new ears. Lord, dost thou not care that my sister hath left me to serve alone? Bid her therefore that she help me. And Jesus answered, Martha, Martha, thou art careful and troubled about many things. But one thing is needful. Mary hath chosen that good part, which shall not be taken away from her. Martha was not lazy. Martha was committed, she was responsible, she was someone who served with genuineness. And yet Jesus said, you are troubled about many things. The original Greek word for troubled there is thoribazo, which means to be agitated, to be thrown out of oneself. Martha was out of herself, and that was not a virtue. It was dispersion. Mary, sitting in silence, present, receptive, was in the theta position. She was not inactive, she was operating at the frequency where real transformation happens. Here is the question you need to answer honestly. In your last 3 weeks, what was the total time you spent sitting doing nothing? No cell phone, no podcast, no mental task list, no silent planning. Just present. Just existing. For most people over 35 in Brazil, the answer is none. And this leads us to the second Hebrew word I need to plant in you today. Shabbat. Shabbat. You have heard it. Everyone has heard it. But most understand it as day of rest, as something religious, as a Jewish cultural observance. Shabbat comes from the root Shabbath. Shabbat, which means to cease, to stop completely, not to take a break, not to take a day off, to later recover lost production. To cease. And God did not create the Shabbat because he was tired. God did not create the Shabbat because creation was complete. Shabbat is not the absence of work. Shabbat is the declaration that the work has reached its end because it was finished. It is a proclamation of sufficiency. God stopped not for lack of energy. God stopped because it was done. When you cannot stop, it is because deep down you believe it is never done, that something is always missing, that approval never arrived, and this belief, operating in your nervous system in permanent beta frequency, literally reorganizes your neurobiology in a way that makes the blessing difficult to receive. It is not a metaphor. The HeartMath Institute demonstrated that the state of cardiac incoherence, chronically produced by stress, creates an electromagnetic field around the body associated with increased reactivity, reduced empathy, and perceptual closure. You literally lose the ability to perceive opportunities when your nervous system is in survival mode. The wrong frequency does not only exhaust, it blinds. Activate the channel bell now so as not to miss the next video, because what comes after this will show you how to reconstruct this frequency from scratch, even if you have an impossible schedule, even if you cannot meditate, even if your mind never stops. That is coming. But first, I need to take you to Moses and the contract that is being torn up now. Exodus chapter 33. God has just said that he would no longer personally go with the people of Israel because they were stiff-necked and he might consume them on the way. He would send an angel ahead, but he would not go himself. And Moses, who had just spent 40 days on the mountain without eating or drinking, who carried the weight of an entire nation on his back, who had literally broken the tablets of the law before the sin of the people, Moses said one of the most courageous things a human being has ever said to God, "If thy presence go not with me, carry us not up hence." Moses refused the angel. Moses refused the promise of the land if it came without the presence. And God answered, "My presence shall go with thee, and I will give thee rest." The word there in Hebrew is nuachah, the same settling we spoke of before. God promised Moses not just the land, he promised the settling, and the settling came attached to the presence. Here is what no one told you. The invisible contract you carry says that the blessing comes after your maximum effort. The word says that the blessing comes with the presence, and the presence is only perceived in the settling, not in the race. Now I want to introduce you to the Greek word that Hebrews chapter 4 uses to describe this state. Katapausis, katapausis. It is translated as rest, but its root is much more precise. It means the permanent cessation of an effort, not a temporary rest to recharge and go back to doing. A cessation. An end to the modality of human effort as the primary production mechanism of your life. Hebrews 4:10 says, "For he that is entered into his rest, he also hath ceased from his own works, as God did from his." From his own works, not from the works of God, from your own, from your human effort as the central engine of your existence. And chapter 4 of Hebrews closes with something shocking. Let us labor therefore to enter into that rest. The only thing the Bible commands you to force is rest. Because entering into sovereign rest goes against all the conditioning the system placed in you. It goes against the voice of trauma. It goes against social approval. It goes against the invisible contract. Now listen to me carefully, because here is the protocol. If you want to recalibrate your brainwaves from chronic beta to receptive theta, you need intentional intervention, not willpower. Protocol. The difference between those who transform and those who merely convince themselves is here. The protocol is called the 3-hour blackout, and it is exactly what it sounds like. You will choose a moment. It could be early in the morning before everyone wakes up. It could be a Saturday. It could be a Sunday afternoon. 3 hours. And during those 3 hours, you will do the following. Turn off all screens. Not on silent, not in the drawer, turned off. You will silence all notifications, all groups, all channels of external demand input. And you will simply exist. But exist with intention. Here are the 3 movements of the blackout. First movement, recognition. You will sit, lie down, or walk in a silent space, and you will recognize out loud, just you and God, that you are not the sustainer of your own life. This may seem theologically obvious, but you need to hear your own voice saying it. Because the brain processes differently that which is vocalized versus that which is only thought. Researchers from PUC Rio documented that intentional verbalization activates regions of the auditory cortex that reinforce the consolidation of new beliefs, with an efficacy up to 3 times greater than silent reading. Say out loud, "I am not the engine of my life, I am the channel." Second movement, silent receptivity. For at least 40 minutes of the 3 hours, you will remain in silence without an agenda, without interceding for a list, without praying for specific things, just present. This is what the contemplative tradition calls apophatic contemplation, silence as a form of prayer. And it is what produces the theta state with more consistency than any active technique. If thoughts come, and they will come, you do not fight them. You observe them and return to the presence. Like an anchor that does not hold the boat but brings it back to the center when the current pulls. Third movement, declaration of identity. Before ending the blackout, you will write by hand, not on the cell phone, by hand, 3 affirmations of identity based on who God says you are, not on what you did, not on what you still need to do, who you are. This activates the process of anakainosis, the Greek word from Romans 12 that we translate as renewal of the mind, but which in its root means literally the renewal that comes from the inside out, a rejuvenation that emerges from the interior, not a reform imposed from the outside in. And the sound key that recalibrates your brainwaves in 7 minutes, it exists. It is called isochronic music or binaural tones in the theta frequency between 4 and 7 hertz. You can find it for free on streaming platforms. Using headphones and listening for 7 to 10 minutes before the second movement of the blackout accelerates the brain transition from beta to theta in a measurable way. The Sleep Institute of São Paulo, linked to UNIFESP, conducted research confirming the efficacy of rhythmic auditory stimulation in inducing low-frequency brain states in adults who present difficulty in spontaneous deceleration. You do not need decades of meditation to access what you were already designed to be. You need protocol and permission, Science gives the protocol, the Word gives the permission, and this video is giving you both. Now I will tell you what happens after you begin to practice the blackout with consistency. Not in theory, what neuroscience and spiritual experience converge in documenting. First, your perception of opportunities changes, not because the world changes, but because you stop being filtered by fear. A brain in chronic beta operates in threat scanning mode. It literally prioritizes negative information over positive information in a pattern called negativity bias, which, according to research from FGV Communications applied to consumer behavior, operates with a ratio of 3:1. The human brain processes a negative experience 3 times more intensely than a positive one of equal intensity. When you reduce the level of beta activation, this bias weakens, and you begin to see what was there all along. Second, your prayers change in quality, not in quantity, in quality. You stop praying in the frequency of scarcity and begin to pray in the frequency of trust. This is not self-help disguised as theology. Psalm 23 itself describes the state we are talking about. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. The theta state is not the absence of difficult circumstances. It is the absence of terror before them. It is sovereign presence in the midst of them. Third, and this is the most counterintuitive, you begin to produce more, not by working more hours, but by working in a better brain state. A study conducted by the University of Melbourne and replicated in a Brazilian context by researchers from UFMG showed that adults who practice regular periods of intentional deactivation, what they call deliberate rest, produce an average of 27% more creative solutions and commit 34% fewer errors in complex tasks than adults in a continuous work regime. Cessation is not the enemy of production, it is its hidden foundation. You spent years believing that maximum effort was the highest offering you could bring to God. But God does not need your exhaustion. He needs your channel open. Share this video with someone you know who is carrying this contract, because there are people in your circle who are bleeding unnecessarily, who are waking up at 4 in the morning worried and calling it purpose, who are falling ill and calling it commitment. This video could be what changes the axis of that person's life, and when you share what transforms your life, you enter the cycle of spiritual reciprocity that the Bible calls giving and receiving, not as a transaction, but as a flow. The contract said, bleed to be blessed, exhaust yourself to deserve, run so as not to lose. The truth says, settle to receive, cease so that he may begin, stop running to become a magnet. Elijah received the bread before walking 40 days, not after. Martha was corrected before serving more, not after. Moses received the promise of settling before entering the land, not after. Rest does not come as a reward for effort. Rest is the door through which correct effort begins. And now before I close, I need one thing from you. Go to the comments and write the word I receive, just that. One word, I receive. Because the moment you declare that you receive before seeing, before fully understanding, before having all the answers, you enter the spiritual state that Scripture calls faith. Not intellectual belief, operational faith. The kind that moves mountains not by the size of your strength, but by the precision of your posture. Write I receive in the comments now. And if you want to understand why the chosen ones go through periods of forced silence, of waiting that seems unfair, of closed doors that make no sense, the next video will show you that these periods are not punishment. They are preparation. And there is a Hebrew name for this process that, when you discover it, will forever change the way you view your desserts. Do not miss it. Activate the bell, and be here when I release it. You were made to receive, not to beg, to settle, not to run, to be a channel, not to be an engine. Welcome to the power of being.